Hello and welcome class to another lesson in operating systems beginning Linux. In this lesson, we'll be covering control flow and file input-output. Some of the structures we'll be covering under control flow include conditional and looping statements. These are classic structures in any programming language. And then we learn how to handle file input and output. So that means reading a file and writing to a file. Just a reminder that a script, it's just a file that contains all the commands we're going to run. Rather than executing those commands manually, you can put them in a script file to organize things, debug, improve on that script. And of course, when it comes to executing, right, it's very, very quick, very easy. And it's going to make those simple, repetitive tasks much more smooth, but also works for really complex workflows. And again, it's going to avoid you making mistakes along the way. So of course, right, I always like to use the analogy of cooking. You can certainly cook off the top of your head, right? Most of the dishes that you're comfortable with. But when it comes to doing new things, doing new dishes, it's much better to follow a recipe. And if you're making that recipe on your own, it's often better, right, to get to that best dish, to get the best execution. You're going to work with that recipe, you're going to improve it, you're going to, work out the kinks. The same goes with scripting. Of course, you could try and memorize so many commands. That might take a while, right? That could take years to become a master scripter, just like a master chef. But if you work with these recipes, with these scripts, if you start with something basic or with a template, of course, it's going to be easier for you to execute those difficult tasks. And if your recipe or script doesn't work right, it's going to be easy to debug those things rather than trying to do it right off the top of your head. So while memorization is definitely a plus when it comes to Bash, it's not a must. I think what's more important is that you get an understanding of the operating system, understanding of how to work with the command line. And from here, I'm actually going to show you how to use some online resources, some that are pretty, new and changing the education game, I would say. How we can actually harness that for our learning, but also for our scripting. Because again, we don't have to do this all on our own, all just based on memory. When it comes to scripting, it's all about working with other people's code, learning how to read it, learning how to improve it, and how to make it your own. And then just a reminder, dynamic scripts, these are just scripts that employ the use of user input. That could be whether it's the read command or using flags. Of course, if we're using or if we're handling dynamic situations, variables are an excellent structure for that. So new ones that we're going to be covering, remember, is going to be conditional, branching logic, and then loops. That's going to help us avoid writing very repetitive code. Another structure that's really great for dynamic scripts is functions, but we're not going to cover this in this class as it is out of the scope of what we need to cover. Also a reminder, we learned the read command, how to actually handle user input with that, read -p, right, if you want to handle prompt. We also learned flags, which kind of go before execution. Remember, read is runtime. As far as flags, we also covered the get options command. We're going to kind of decipher how this command works, because we will be learning what the while and case keywords mean here. So let's get to control flow. So what are we talking about when we say control flow? Well, control flow is a sequence in which commands are executed in a script. So by using certain structures, we're going to allow our code to make decisions and to repeat certain blocks of code. So that's going to minimize the number of statements. It's going to help avoid writing very, very repetitive code. If you see a lot of your code repeating over and over again, that probably means you need to include more of these control flow structures. So yeah, this is going to make your script dynamic because it's going to allow your programs to adapt to different situations. Without control flow, basically your code only works for one certain situation. With control flow, you can handle many different scenarios with a single piece of code. So there are two types of control flow structures that we're going to be covering and that are extremely common in programming. And that's going to be conditional branching and looping. First, we'll look at conditional branching. We'll look at a few different structures there, and then we'll look at only one structure for looping.